as you saw with Rob's demo, we have a lot of data, and it's not necessarily, we make it easy, but it's not as easy as we can make it to actually for you to navigate from screens to screens to actually figure out, okay, if I'm trying to follow this path of this application, you saw how many views he had to go through and how many widgets he had to kind of go through. That requires some knowledge, advanced knowledge of the product and kind of go into it. And so we are aware of that, and one of the things that we are trying to work on is kind of this end-to-end path visibility. So from the user all the way down to the device that is actually finally accessed, whether that's a server device or something like that. And so our goal is to be able to do kind of path analysis. Whether it's WAN-based, and so you've got, there are companies out there that are doing, path analysis for, SaaS-based applications, so that if I'm a consumer of NetSuite or Salesforce, for instance, and I want to figure out why is my access to Salesforce right now so slow? Is it a problem with my network provider, or is the problem really with Salesforce? That's a set of use cases that we want to be able to solve, because kind of, that user here, is using, a SaaS-based application, and you end up with a lot of hops in between, and you've got, typically you would like to do a trace route, but you need more information than that to actually really be able to kind of pinpoint where the problem is. And also, if the problem lies with, your service provider, which of the service providers who may be involved within that path, and so on. So that's one area where we are currently investing in trying to solve that problem, basically, and be able to do a really kind of a in-depth look at the path analysis for over the WAN that is basically used to access SaaS application. And then the other part is we want to do the same thing for, the on-premises, what I would call on-premises applications, where basically you own both of the endpoints, the application and the service that is basically delivered over the network. And the idea is, yes, okay, it starts with some type of smart trace route where you need to be able to kind of identify what is the path, what are all the intermediaries that you have there. But again, if you look at the technology stack involved there for doing trace route, you can do it the very naive way, which is, the thing that doesn't give you a lot of information, or there's a lot of things that you can do, in a really smart manner to actually kind of understand a lot of the different characteristics of the different hops, which will basically give you, a lot of, bandwidth analysis, effective bandwidth, those type of things, even detecting, half duplex, full duplex type of issues, and basically. That is basically, a set of technologies that we are looking at also right now and basically kind of investing into, so that first of all, we can actually kind of get a first sense of, okay, what are all the intermediaries on the path between my user and, let's say, Exchange, for instance, that they're trying to access and it's slow. And as they look at that, then if those devices are managed by Orion and one of those products, then we can start tying, information about bandwidth and DPI seen by the different devices themselves. We can also kind of, correlate that back to the flow information that we see, or the DPI flow information that we see, which is really at the packet level. And also, we can basically then start looking at, first of all, who is that person also, so that it's not just a user, but if that user actually is somebody that is actually on our network and is supposed to be there, and if we kind of hook that back to the heat map and the information that we have about the access point, we know exactly what is the originating point for that request and where it's going. And so for us, the goal is to go and provide, a much better graphical user experience, I would say, in terms of being able to troubleshoot. Once you know that whether an alert has been raised because you have a problem in terms of application latency that's been detected by DPI, for instance, or it is because this user here actually called the help desk because he has a problem, accessing Exchange, then we want to put the network admin and the person who's basically in charge of troubleshooting that with a clear view of what is the path all the way from that user to the service, give me all the hops, show me all the relevant information on that path. If it's an issue with quality of service, because maybe some QoS has been changed, we actually have that information as part of our NTA product. NTA monitors all the QoS stuff. And so we can start layering and actually, more importantly, we can filter out of those layers the stuff that we believe will not be useful for you to actually solve that problem, because all the information there is actually in check. It's not out of bounds. And And so we can actually do a better job there of really kind of pulling the interesting part of information, the piece of information that's actually relevant in helping you diagnose that problem. And that's what we are working on right now. And if you think about it, we already have actually a lot of the raw data source that is needed to actually for us to layer that on the information. What we are really kind of are working on right now is this concept of net stack. We built something similar on the application side, and now basically we are building a net stack view, which basically is an end-to-end path analysis of, from the user all the way down to the service. If multipath is involved, we need to be able to recognize that also and kind of, at least show you that multipathing may be involved at one point or another along the path, so that actually we can, basically give you a high degree of confidence that basically we have understood the path between the two endpoints, and that basically we are giving you all the information that is basically currently latent inside each of those silos in a much more integrated kind of interface. That's the goal that we have, and that's where we are investing right now. We have teams that are working on this. I mean, I can't tell you when they're going to come out to market, but that's kind of for us. That's where we see where monitoring needs to go and troubleshooting needs to go. It's not just about displaying you more data. We already have enough data collected. It's about kind of doing smart things with that data, and that's really kind of where for us it's worth investing at this point, because I think that's where we can make a lot of difference for the actual network admin that actually need to troubleshoot that thing. And if we can, as I said earlier, if instead, even if it's an hour that it needs to have right now to actually go into the different tools, pull the data that it needs, if we can bring that down to 30 minutes or 15 minutes, then I think we have achieved something that is actually meaningful.
Yeah. And that's the problem. And there's so many tools out there that can get the data. The data is not the problem.
Yep.
Having the data, it's presenting it in a way that's going to be meaningful and useful.
Yes.
It's not just presenting; it's doing something with it.
That's the next.
If you can do something with it and then present an amalgamation of information, that's the key.
Yeah. What I mean is, like, you can take that data and present it all over the place and not correlate any of it together, and that's not useful to me, right? But if I can see it in a way that is useful, right, and then make changes based on that,
yeah, I think that's the next step after that, is for you to take action based on the view that we are giving you. But the first step is for us to actually do the correlation part, which is not just a UI correlation part. I think UI correlation has a lot of value. If you have two graphs and they align in time and you can actually see, okay, my database response time and I have a vMotion event happening at that point, yes, very useful. There's a lot of stuff that happens that needs a little more in-depth, correlation. Like if I need to figure out if there was a config change that actually led, to that problem on that path, well, I need to be able to see that. If, we change, the config change involved actually changing a quality of service, a QoS assignment, for one of the queues, for instance, and we can actually see that, okay, let's put that onto the segment that's involved with that and the device that is actually, the change happened, and let's show you that stuff happened there. And let's remove, all the other kind of widgets that are not needed for solving that incident. There's nothing wrong with the views that we have right now.
Right.
It's just that we need something more than that. And that's why we are looking at this concept of I would say a smart workspace, if you want, and really an incident workspace, where people go and that's their workbench for working and troubleshooting things. And the default view on that should be, for the network, should be the path that's involved into that particular incident, and then let you bring the different, kind of metrics and telemetry information and log information that is relevant to the different devices, as it will help you kind of, going into that troubleshooting, process. That's really kind of where, for us, we see the market going, and there's a lot of need for that right now. And we are talking with the virtualization guys and about NSX, and one of the use cases that they have also is troubleshooting. And how do their customers basically look at those virtual and kind of those overlay network and figure out where the problem is? Is it at the overlay and configuration level of the overlay, or is it at the underlying fabric that is basically supporting the overlay network. And so we see this dovetail really nicely with this concept, where basically this doesn't stop just at the physical network, but it basically covers also the overlay networks and things like that.
Well, there are two kinds of correlations that were, I think I heard implicitly in what you just said, that are kind of easy. So with the config change and route change,
Yeah.
I like to have data going into syslog and be able to view a window around the outage time because of, then you can do temporal correlation.
Yes.
And then the other thing that I think the groups referred to before is scope correlation. If I know who's down, I can look for commonalities. Are they going across a common link through a common router or whatever, particularly if I have a topology model?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the goal is to pull all of those things together, and for us, it is not too far-fetched. And I think that the good thing about this model is it's really incremental, because you have, first of all, temporal correlation is relatively easy to do. It's basically because you've got one dimension that you try to correlate, and then the goal there is to find what are the interesting events on the timeline for all the different data streams. So at that point, you turn, back to anomaly detection, but that's where I want to get to the sense of what is practical for us and for SolarWinds versus trying to be the IBM of the world, like autonomic computing, all of that. I think that's all great. Those are great visions, but for the time that it takes for them to actually come up with systems that people are trusting, people still have end up having to troubleshoot things by hand right now. And I think that we can help on that front, and that's kind of that's the vision that we are embarked on right now.
R&D funding and time are both scarce commodities, and you better put them where they're going to be effective.
Yes.